Welcome back to Rollin with Olan. I'm Jeff Olan, your host. Today we've got a really special person that I've known for a long time. I was going to say a friend. Well, he's a friend now, that's for sure. He was involved with Grey's Anatomy when I was, and it's a long story. But Tony Phelan is with us. Tony is an Emmy nominated, Directors Guild nominated, and winner for Grey's Anatomy. He also has many other awards, including the Gotham Award and the Humanitarius Award. Producer, director, showrunner, Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you, Tony. I just want to start out with where you and Joan met. I think this will set the precedence for the rest of the our conversation here.
Well, Joan and I are married. We've been married for, God, since 1993 and have always worked together. And we discovered in our working relationship early on that we had different strengths. And that I think allows us to not fight as much as we might otherwise around issues. I mean, the other thing that we share is we share a sense of what we like and what we think is good. And so we trust each other to do different things as we manage, running shows. It's such a big job. There's so much to do that having a partner that you inherently trust is really important. And I think a great way to kind of keep your sanity as you do it and not burn out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a true partnership, right? Somebody that you're with almost all the time, and here you guys are literally. I mean, with all the work you're doing together. I want to go back, just back for a second. You were involved in theater as a child, I had read, and you went to Yale intending to become an actor, and your acting teacher suggested you were better suited to direct. Have
No,
you think?
my acting teacher actually said, "You're never going to be an actor. You're not good enough." And for 18-year-old me, this was devastating.
Yes.
But he was enough of a teacher and a kind of a great mentor of mine to say, but I do think you could be a director. So I
Yeah.
want you to come and be my assistant on this production of Glass Menagerie that he was doing with Karen Allen and Treat Williams. And
Amazing.
so that, and Joanne Woodward. So I went and did that, and that kind of changed my life.
Oh,
And
amazing.
he was absolutely right. I was much better suited to being a director, and I think ultimately to being a writer than I was to being an actor.
It's just
Um,
amazing how one person could say something to us, right, and just change the trajectory of our life.
yeah, and you meet those people in your life, and you don't necessarily know at the time how important they're going to be, but when you look back, you're like, wow, I took a big turn. I mean, Joan and I say to young people that we talk to, you're never going to know what your career is going to look like. It's going to
Hmm.
look very different than you think it's going to look. But if you're nimble and you're smart about it, you will be open to the idea of pivoting.
Hmm.
And I think a really good skill to have is to recognize where those green lights in your career are happening and
Hmm.
move toward them, even if they're not in the direction that you thought you were going to go. I thought I was going to be a theater director. Joan thought she was going to be an actress. And ultimately, we're doing work that is very close to what we thought we were going to do. But we would not, if you talked to me when I was in my 20s, I would never have imagined doing this. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know that it existed really.
yeah, and that's kind of what I want to get into a little bit. You didn't know it existed. There's so many people out there that have no clue. You guys, you came out to L.A. as you stated. I mean, I know you're from Ohio originally.
Hmm.
I'm an Indiana boy myself.
Oh, yeah.
So, we've got that Midwestern value, but you came out here to Los Angeles. You guys were writing, you were doing all that. I think your first assignment was Law and Order, perhaps?
Well, no, we were on a show on USA called Cover Me about
Hmm.
an undercover FBI family, and the showrunner was Sean Cassidy
Oh, wow.
of To Do Run Run and The Hardy
Yeah.
Boys.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of for us. It was very exciting and some old Hollywood. Um, but yeah, I mean, when we started out, we were doing. You're just going from show to show and doing whatever you get hired on. And in those first 5 years, we were on 9 shows.
Mm,
Shows
amazing.
kept getting like canceled, but you do a cop show, you do a spy show, you do a medical show, you do whatever is coming across your plate, and you learn how to research, you learn how to tell a story. In these were all, none of this was before streaming, so this was all you're telling stories in 42 minutes with a certain number of commercial breaks. And so that structure, once you get used to the structure, it helps in your storytelling, because you understand how to drive the story towards the commercial break, and how at the 30-minute mark, that commercial, the act out of that commercial is the most important one, because you don't want people changing the channel. So that's where your big cliffhanger of the episode happens at that moment.
Yeah.
And those are lessons that you learn just by doing it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because there's so many writers that tune into this podcast, and you're really the first writer for television that I've had on. And I was just you just mentioned some things, but can you walk us through that process a little deeper? Like, how did you guys start out? Like, how did you and Joan get that first big break? And like, you come out here, of course, you have your stories that you've written, done whatever you guys have done in the past and what have you. But once you come out here, I mean, it's a whole different world in Hollywood and now all over the world, right? Because Hollywood's not the only hub right now. But can you walk us through? Can you go a little deeper on that to walk
Yeah.
us through?
We were theater writers. We had
Mhm.
written several plays and got some attention that way. And back in the day, if you were interested in writing television, you would write what were called specs. So
Mhm.
you would identify a show and write a sample script of that show. And so this will tell you how long ago it was. This was 2000. We had a spec of Felicity,
Oh,
and we had a spec of oh God, what was that David Kelly show about defense attorneys? We had a spec of that as
Boston
well.
Legal,
Boston,
Boston,
yeah, not Boston Legal.
The other Boston,
Uh,
Boston
Prac-
Public, Pub,
I
Boston
can't
Public.
remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a legal show. So we had
Mhm.
those two, and then we had our play. And so we came out, and we did not. We spent about 3 to 4 months coming out to LA from New York for a week at a time, doing as many general meetings as we could, because we had gotten this manager who had seen a play reading that we had done and liked the material and decided to rep us. And so the other thing that we did is Joan had these solo shows that she did. So we rented a space in Hollywood and a little theater, and Joan did one of her solos. And there were literally, we invited everyone in the town. There were maybe 8 people in the audience. It was in the middle
Mhm.
of the day.
Yeah.
But one of those 8 people was our first agent at
Wow.
William Morris. And
Wow.
so
Not just a small agency,
no,
but one of the biggest in the
they
world.
said, yes, we're going to take a risk
Wow.
on you guys. And so, but they said, but you need to move out here. You can't do it from New York.
Yeah.
So we moved out with our 3-year-old and no money, and then started submitting our materials and going on interviews for shows. The first show that we went in for was this undercover FBI family show for USA, and we booked the job. And from that time, we've never really stopped working. And
Yeah.
I think it was the advantage that we had was that we had spent the past 10 years in New York writing and rewriting and rewriting our own material. And really, as a television writer, when you're starting out, you're writing in somebody else's voice. So you have to be able to constantly rewrite yourself.
Yeah.
The other skill that we had when we arrived was we were very comfortable with actors.
Yeah.
So we could be on set and as the producing writer on set and adjust the dialogue with the actors, while keeping in mind this is the story that we're telling.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're a producer on set as a writer, what your job is to make sure that the showrunner is going to get the episode that was written, that there aren't going to be any surprises, that the performances are going to be good, that the direction is telling the story. So you're kind of there to make sure that's happening. And that was very familiar to us because we'd been doing that kind of work in New York in the theater. So back at that time, it felt to us like most of the people who were writing television had had another career before that.
Mm-hmm.
They were doctors or lawyers or playwrights, or they had had some other life. And when you're hiring a staff of writers, what you're looking for is life experience. Because that's what you're going to strip mine to be in the show.
Yes.
You're looking for people who have experiences, humiliating stories and stories about their shitty jobs or whatever, but you're looking for those are the stories that are going to be the grist of what you're creating the show. So when we were in the Grey's Anatomy room, it was in the early seasons, it was a bunch of actors, ex-actors, ex-playwrights, a couple doctors, but the room was very alive with big personalities who had big stories to tell. And that's where all of that stuff, the interpersonal stuff, the soap of that show came from.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you get your writers for, especially now with the shows that you're doing, and you just kind of answered, I mean, obviously you're interviewing them and you're seeing what else they have done out there, and you're taking an overall look at them and trying to decide if they're right for that particular TV series.
The other thing that you're looking for, though, is you're looking for, is this a person that I want to be in a room with for hours at a time?
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's you sitting in a room talking about story and trying to figure out the best way to tell it. And what I say to my writers all the time is, if you're pitching an idea that you've seen in a movie, chances are I've already seen it, and the audience has already seen it. And once the audience knows where the story's going to go, you're dead. It's over. They're going to either turn it off or they're going to lose interest. Our job is to keep the audience on their toes and have them not know where the story is going to go. So you need that personal experience and that ability to say, this is how the story would go if it were just down the middle. How can I kind of turn it inside out and come up with something new, come up with something a little different, keep the audience on their toes? I think that's really the hallmark of good television.
Yeah. And, in a writing room, is there an average amount of people or writers that you guys are?
Depends on how big your order is. I mean, we're doing a lot of network right now, and network, when we were on Grey's, it was 24 to at times 26 episodes a season.
Right.
On Fire Country, and Sheriff Country, it's 20 episodes a season. So if you've got that many people, you're talking about 7 or 8 people in a writer's room.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Let's get to the shows you mentioned, which I was going to bring up, of course. Let's just talk about Grey's Anatomy for a second. I think you and Joan started in 2005.
Yeah, season 2. We were brought on, and it was a wonderful room. And I think that one of Shonda Rhimes' strengths as a showrunner is, I think she's a really good judge of talent. And the people that were hired in those early years was like a murderer's row of amazing writers, and writers who've gone on to create their own.
So many of them, Peter, and so many writers from that show. Yeah, it's incredible. You guys, others.
Yeah. I mean, Pete Nowak created How to Get Away with Murder. Jenna Bans has created Good Girls. Deborah Kahn went off to do The Diplomat. I mean, all sorts of writers. Alan Heinberg is doing Sandman on Netflix right now. So just great writers, great people, and we had so much fun doing it. But it
Yeah.
was a whirlwind. It was when we came on the show had already achieved a certain amount of popularity, but by the end of season 2 into season 3, it was just like crazy.
Yeah. It was.
So
Mm.
yeah,
No,
it
you're
was.
right. You're right.
Everyone was talking about it, and the actors suddenly had to deal with being recognized all the time and
Mhm.
just not losing their privacy, and it was a pressure cooker, and certain people handled it better than others, but I don't fault anybody because it was a crazy time, and we were just trying to keep our heads above water and tell the best stories that we could.
Yeah, and they were great stories. And I started right out the gate with Grace. I was there the first season. Rob Korn and Peter
Yep.
Horton, and Ann Kinberg, and the four of us in a room together. And so I went in right away, had no clue what it would turn into. It's just an amazing story, and it was so great. And you guys were wonderful. And you and Joan I would see from time to time. I'd wave. The one thing about somebody who does background casting for a living, and then somebody who's a producer and a writer, when you're in the rooms with them, there's just maybe a hi, this or that. Everybody's walking a little bit of eggshells, so you're just like, okay, who's this person? What can I say to them? What do they need from me? How can I get them that and this and that? And we'd go off the scripts. I'd read every script. For me, it was a wonderful experience, and I know for you guys it was as well. How did you and Joan end up getting Grey's Anatomy? What was that interview like?
Well, first I want to say, Jeff, about background casting, and this is, I think, where your work on the show was really great, and this is something that Joan and I have carried forward in all the work that we do. But the attention to detail that Shonda and Grace had in terms of the world that we wanted to create,
Yeah,
in terms of diversity, in terms of we want to see all sorts of different people. And we want to make sure that the world of that hospital is going to be representative so that everyone who watches the show, even if they don't even notice the background, if they chose to look at the background, once again, that background would represent them in some way. And I think that that's really powerful.
yeah,
These shows have a tremendous ability because we're in people's homes every week, week after week, and they begin to think of these characters as people that they know and they like and they want to spend time with. And it's a tremendous opportunity and a responsibility to what are you putting into people's homes? What are the messages that you're putting into people's homes? Who are the characters that you're putting into people's homes? And how can you present the world as you wish it was? And so
yeah, yeah.
I think that's really it's really important, and I think you were a big part of that.
Well,
Um,
thank you,
uh,
thank you, thank you. I loved it. I love doing it. I love doing series. I mean, Grey's is really close to my heart for 16 seasons on that show. And it's you're absolutely right. I mean, background actors are so important to every scene. Like you said, you may not really see them, but they're there. And if they're not there, the actors are not right on. Directors, producers, everybody can't really get exactly the story that you guys want to tell across. And you need them. You definitely need them. And I'm so happy to have been in that space for so many years, and to give people like you and Joan and Shonda and Betsy, and everybody on that show, what we do, and to get them out there and get the people to show up and professional and take care of business. That's what makes these television shows, a big part of what makes them successful.
and it is a family, and
It sure is.
you get used to seeing those same faces every day, episode after episode, and you make friendships, and it's the important thing, I think, from a showrunner's point of view is you want to make sure that everybody involved in the process,
Hmm.
from number one on the call sheet to the new guy who just started in catering,
Mm-hmm.
feels like we are all part of the same family and we're all working towards this same goal. And everybody's contribution is important and everybody's contribution is valuable. And if you can make people feel that, you will be surprised at the creativity and the commitment that you're able to get out of people.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So, okay, I'm not going to let you out of this. How did you and Joan get the job for
Well,
Grey's Anatomy? What was that
we
like?
tell this story all the time, but we are ashamed to say that we turned down Grey's Anatomy 3 times
I did not
because
know that.
no, we that uh, pilot season, because it used to be that all of the networks would make a certain number of pilots and then they would choose which pilots were going to go forward. Once they made those choices, then there was this thing called staffing season where all of these new shows would have to hire writers' rooms. So there was a feeding frenzy in the writer community of trying to, like, what show are you going to go on? Can you get that job? Where are you going to land? So that season, we had gotten an offer from the new Law and Order. We'd gotten an offer from a show about a woman who spoke to the dead that was called Medium, and we
Uh-huh.
got a show about uh, uh, female surgeons called Grey's Anatomy. And of course, because we were experienced and we knew everything, we were like, well, you got to do Law and Order. I mean, Law and Order is going to be on the air forever. These other shows aren't going to be this. They're going to be like 3 episodes and done.
Right.
So we went on the new Law and Order, which was called Law and Order Trial by Jury, with BB Newirth as the lead, and it was all about the prosecutors, and there were no cops in it. So it soon became clear as we were writing that show and making that show that we had made a horrible mistake, and that this Law and Order was not going to be long for this world. And so we scrambled and called up our friend Jim Perriott, who was working with Shonda at the time because she'd never done television before. So Jim was a writer producer who was paired with her and who was helping her figure out how to run a show. And we called Jim and we're like, is there any chance we can come over to Grey's now? And he was like, there's no chance. We just hired somebody else. And we were like, we're such idiots.
We screwed up.
Meanwhile, Joan was in a Starbucks and she's there waiting in line, and behind her are 2 women and they're talking and they're like, did you see that new medical show last night? It was really good. I'm in. And Joan is like, I am an idiot. But Jim managed to cobble together enough money to bring us on. So that's why we came on season 2. And once we were there, and once we kind of got to know everybody, got to know Shonda, and figure out what we could bring to that show, it was great. We just had a great time. And I think Shonda was, at that time, really needed somebody who could be on set and make sure that she was going to get what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so once she discovered that I could do that job, she kind of threw me on set, and I was on set a lot. And eventually that my being on set that much, Shonda and Rob Korn came to me season 5 and said, okay, we know that you're no longer directing theater and you haven't in a while because you've been writing television, but it's time for you to direct an episode. And so that was great and a real vote of confidence. And I will always be in their debt for letting me do that. And I got to direct my first episode, season 5. And then from that point on, directed many, many episodes until we left at the end of season 10. So.
Yeah, well, I want to just touch on 2 things you said. Well, you didn't go to Medium. By the way, I was on Medium.
Were you really?
For 6 seasons during that time. We would have loved to have had you, but the writers did fine. I'm glad you went to Grey's, and and I'm glad that Rob and Shonda came to you and asked you to write, and you and Joan, and I believe you directed 14 episodes or so of Grey's Anatomy.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I also got to do the musical episode, which was really fun. Shonda when we were just talking, socializing, several of us in the writers' room came from doing musical theater as well. And Shonda is a huge musical theater fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so jokingly, season 2, we were like, okay, when's the musical episode of Grey's Anatomy going to happen? And
Yeah.
we laughed about it. And that was season 2. By season 7, we had Sara Ramirez, who came from Broadway,
Yes.
from musicals. We had Kevin McKidd, who had performed in a band and as a singer back in Scotland. And we had Chandra Wilson, Dr. Bailey, who was also from a musical theater background. And we started to say to ourselves, we could actually do this. And then Shonda came up with the kind of genius idea that rather than write original songs, what we would use is we would use songs that had premiered on Grey's Anatomy and had kind of become very popular in the public because they'd been placed on Grey's Anatomy. And so then we had this catalog of songs, and then it was about matching the songs to what we wanted to have happen in the show. And it was a great experience, and something that it took us about 6 to 8 months to put that whole thing together, but it was really satisfying. And the great thing about a show like Grey's Anatomy, especially that deep into the run of it, is that the show has an elasticity to it
Mm-hmm.
where it can bend and you hopefully don't break it. So we could do a flashback episode where Owen Hunt was back in Iraq, and we could do a musical, and we could do a film noir, and we could do all sorts of different episodes to kind of give the actors a chance to grow, to give the directors a chance to grow, and to give the audience a chance to experience different genres and find out new things about the characters, so that we weren't as constricted by the way we usually told stories. I think we did an episode in real time, and I would just watch The Pit, and they do, a great version of that, telling stories, in real time, hour by hour. So Grey's was a great training ground too, both in terms of how to write a successful network show. And then Joan and I took over running the show for Shonda in season 7, and how to run a show. And that experience allowed us, when we then left Grey's and started creating our own shows, allowed us to have the experience to be able to run those shows ourselves.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, so I'm glad you just answered that. Because it's you guys are, you're a showrunner. You're both showrunners. You've done so much, and I was gonna ask, what Grey's had taught you to do that, and it taught a lot. It taught me a lot on my level, so I can only imagine. And you're so right. Working with Shonda and everybody over there. I mean, it was such a family, such a team, and I'm sure it is in everything you do. And you moved on from that with great success. Like you said at the beginning of this, you guys have never stopped. I mean, you did Console of Dads for NBC. You did Doubt for CBS. You did the Nat Geo show, A Small Light, which received a TV Academy honors, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us about that one, because if I believe, I read somewhere you did 5 years of research on that.
Yeah.
And can you explain that? Because what a story. And I know it's streaming on Hulu and Nat G and Disney Plus still. Can you talk about that and talk about the lead actress a little bit? Meep Guys, I believe is her name.
Yeah. So we had taken our family to Amsterdam, and when you're in Amsterdam, you can go visit the Anne Frank Museum, which is in the office building where Otto Frank had his business, and the family hid up in what they call the secret annex. They hid from the Nazis, and so we're going through the museum with our kids, and I'm reading this plaque about Otto Frank's secretary, who's a woman named Miep Gies, and she hid the Frank family for 4 years. And I'm reading this plaque and I see how old she was, and I look over and I see my son, who is in college and about the same age as her. And I say to myself, he can't even find his way back to the hotel from here.
Mm,
How did she manage to hide these people?
mm,
And what led to that decision? And what allowed her to get up day after day after day? Because she was the person who was bringing them food and bringing them news, and just having the weight of that on this young woman and her husband, I thought was a great story that hadn't really been told yet. And so Joan and I decided we want to pursue this. We think that there's something here. So
mhm,
we started reading everything we could get our hands on about the two of them. And we hired a Dutch researcher because a lot of the records were in Dutch,
mhm.
and a translator. And we just started digging in. And after about 5 years, we felt like we knew the story well enough to pitch it. And we pitched it around town, and Nat Geo and Disney Plus said, "Yeah, let's do this."
Mm,
So it's a 6 episodes, no, 8 episode streaming series, and the cast is a wonderful British actress named Belle Powley plays Meep,
mhm,
and Liev Schreiber plays Otto Frank.
mm.
And the interesting thing about the show is we spend time in the annex with the Franks and the other people who are there, but we also spend time with Meep and her husband outside.
Wow.
And what we discovered is that along with the Franks, they were hiding at least 12 other people during the
Mm.
war. And the Franks never knew about it because Meep and her husband didn't want to freak them out and didn't want them to think, oh my God, if those people are arrested, do they know about us? And they didn't want them to have any kind of additional anxiety. Um, and so it was really a labor of love that we got to do. And we went over to Prague and Amsterdam and shot it, and people really reacted to it, responded to it in a gratifying way. And it was one of those things where you have an idea in a museum
Yeah.
5 years before, and then there it is on screen for people to
It,
see.
it's
So
incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. And, everybody check it out, seriously. And just, it's so relevant, especially nowadays, right? I mean, just got to keep that out there. People need to understand, it's a life to shelter Anne Frank's family from the Nazis. I mean, it's an incredible story. And, congratulations on that, Tony,
thank you.
to you and Joan. I mean,
Um,
it's really something. So again, it's on Hulu, Disney Plus, as well as Nat
Apple,
Geo.
and you can find it on Amazon Prime as well. And I think that the message that you come away from is something that Meep always said, because you know, kids after they read the diary would reach out to her and
Mm,
say, like, why did you do this? And she would say, you know, even a secretary or a teenager can make a small light in a dark
mm,
room.
wow.
And that's really what it's
Oh,
about, is about every day making the decision to help, to be human, to make that very human connection with people.
that's
So
powerful. That's powerful. And thank you for going to the museum with your family and getting that idea in your head. I would imagine that happens with you quite a bit, maybe.
well, it's funny because we're just starting work now on a show called Majesty that is about Elizabeth I and Tudor England, and a myth that we heard about Elizabeth I that our friend Bill Harper, who was working with us on Small Light, heard when he was on a tour in the Cotswolds in England. And he heard this myth and he came back from the trip and he said, I found our next show.
Oh, man,
And so indeed he has. And we're going to start shooting that hopefully the beginning of 2026.
amazing.
But yeah. And the exciting thing about my job is that it takes you all over the place. I'm researching Tudor England while I'm also researching wildland firefighters and the inmate firefighting program for Fire Country, and at the same time telling the story of a female sheriff in a small
Yes.
Northern California town who is dealing with being the first female in that job And what does it mean to be policing in a community where you pretty much know everybody?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're coming up on a scene, and your first instinct might not be to arrest, but rather to de-escalate.
Yeah. Sheriff country, right?
Sheriff country.
Sheriff country. Can we talk about Fire Country, which
Yeah.
was just picked up for its fourth season?
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on that.
Thank
I'm
you.
using that word a lot, but as my audience can tell, Tony and Joan have been busy. They're busier than most people in Hollywood nowadays.
That's
But
true.
congratulations on Fire Country. Talk about that for a little bit. And I want to know, like, what's your collaboration with the lead?
Max Terriot. Yeah.
His name. How
Max
do you say his
Terriot.
first name?
Max Terriot.
Yeah, it's the last name I was having. You're right, but how did that come about? Because he's a writer and executive producer on it as well, and what have you.
Well,
So
Max
what
had
did that?
come to, he was an actor on SEAL Team, a
Mm-hmm.
CBS show, and he had come to CBS and said, I grew up in Northern California in this very small town called Occidental, and everybody in that town is a firefighter.
Hmm.
Everybody's a first responder, and you just grow up in that community. And one of the interesting things about that town is that they have these what are called camps, conservation camps, where inmates in the California penal system can go and earn a place there and fight wildland forest fires, and by that service reduce their sentence.
Mm.
And so Max came to CBS with that idea, and they hooked Max up with Jerry Bruckheimer Television. And Bruckheimer and Joan and I had done Council of Dads together at NBC, and Bruckheimer called us and said, we think this is a show, and you guys would be right to tell this story. And we heard firefighter show, and we were like, there's so many firefighter shows on the air. We don't want to do a firefighter show.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruckheimer was like, no, you really need to hear this.
Wow.
And we sat down with Max, and 10 minutes into the meeting, I turned to Joan and I was like, this is a show. This is a great show, because it allows us to talk about a lot of things which have always been important to us. Mass incarceration, the idea of forgiveness, the story of a prodigal son coming back to their hometown when they've kind of screwed up their life, and what can they do to redeem themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Just these kind of universal themes that we find very powerful, and that we want to talk about and find a way to get into a dialogue with an audience about. And that's what what Fire Country allowed us to do. And so, yeah, it's a great team of people. There are several Grey's Anatomy alums over there, but we're really excited about the show. Tia Napolitano is the showrunner, and Barbara Friend, who's another Grey's writer, is over there as well. And it's a really exciting show, and I think it shows people this small town of Edgewater that we created. We like to say the aspiration of that show is family and this community. It's not about fancy cars or clothes or jewels or whatever. It's about being in a community where people support each other and where you kind of know everybody. And so the show was successful, and CBS then asked us to come up with a spin-off, come up with a different, what other part of Edgewater can we explore? And so we decided to tell a cop show, a sheriff show about Edgewater, and tell the story of a mother, Mickey Fox, who is played by the wonderful Morena Baccarin, who has a father, because in Northern California, this is the business up there, who is a weed grower, and her daughter is struggling with substance abuse while she is the sheriff of the town.
Oh my gosh.
So, and it's a great opportunity to explore all sorts of corners of Edgewater that we haven't seen before, and to once again tell very personal, relatable stories while having a case of the week.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Well, I mean, you guys have done so much. It's incredible. What excites you nowadays most about your work?
What excites me is finding good stories to tell. I mean, that's really, I feel very lucky and blessed to have a forum and to be able to tell them. And that forum is really rooted in the partnership that we have with CBS, with the CBS studios, and with the network. We've got amazing collaborators there. And then finding these other stories like Majesty or A Small Light that need to live in a different place because they're limiteds or the subject matter, but having a proven track record now, we can get those set up and tell those stories as well. And
Well,
so we feel very lucky to be able to have that opportunity.
yeah, I would imagine, when you have like people like Jerry Bruckheimer saying, "Hey, do this show and whatever." What an Uber producer he is, right? But um, I guess it comes to, how do people get ideas to producers like you, or if they have like written something already, how do they get it into the right hands? A lot of people have ideas out there, they have no idea how to do it, and I mean, what is that? Because like I know a lot of writers out there have like first look deals, so you can't really do a whole lot with, or does your company, do you guys have people send things in? How does that work?
We are our company Midwest Livestock just signed a deal with CBS to bring them projects that we would produce but not write.
Mm-hmm.
And so that works with our development executive, Kate Wagner, is constantly meeting with writers and talking to producers and looking at material and looking at IP and trying to find those things that feel for our company and Joan and myself in our wheelhouse. There has to be something about the idea that we feel like our contribution is going to be valuable,
Yeah.
that is about regular everyday people who are struggling to be good in the world. That's
Mm-hmm.
really what we're about. So you wouldn't necessarily bring us a show about gangsters or a show about, but at the same time, if it has that slant to it, maybe it would work with us. um,
Right. You guys you're more drama related, correct? I
yes,
mean,
we're not in the comedy world really at all, and they are kind of separate.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're always on the lookout for what is that idea that is, for lack of a better word, undeniable,
Mm-hmm.
that people are going to be excited to see, and that because it's such a commitment, we're going to be willing to put in years of our lives bringing to the screen, because it's a long process, and it's a process that's fraught with ups and downs. And we have a host of projects that we're really excited about that we can't find a place for right now. Either the time is wrong or the pieces didn't come together in the right way, or I mean, there are some heartbreaking stories of projects that just didn't find a home.
Right.
um, so
Right.
it's always a crapshoot. But I would say to young people who are interested in doing it, you want to, before you have your original idea, I think it's always best to find your way into the business. Either work in a mailroom, or be a writer's assistant on a show, or be a writer's PA on a show, or because it's important for you to have a basic understanding of the way the business works.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier than to find your way in. Joan and I were very adamant early on in our career that we didn't want to write any pilots or create any shows until the studio would allow us to run the show,
Mm.
because we had many experiences with new writers who had written a show and then were paired with an experienced showrunner, and if those two people aren't totally in sync,
Mm-hmm.
somebody's going to get fired. And 9 times out of 10, the person who gets fired is the new writer,
Mm-hmm.
because they
Mm-hmm.
simply don't understand that it's not just about writing. You are a writer producer. So in success, you are running a $20 million company.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to do that. And the
Yeah.
only way to be able to do that is to see how it's done.
Yeah.
I
Well,
say
you
to
got.
all of the writers that I hire, regardless of their level on shows, 3/4 of your job is to write scripts and come up with ideas in the writer's room for this show. The other quarter of your job is to figure out how to be a showrunner so that you can then run your own show. And the way that you do that is you go around and you meet everybody and you sit down with Jeff Olan and you say, Jeff, what is your job? What is challenging about your job? And what do you want from a showrunner? How can a showrunner make your job better and easier to do?
Mm-hmm.
And you do that with everybody on the crew list, so that by the time you do have your first show, you know everybody's job, and you're always working to A, make them feel included, but B, help them do their jobs. Because in success, the more successful they are, the more successful the show is going to be.
Solid. You could not have said that better. I think that's everyone could agree on that, and that's to writers. So you've worked with a lot of actors out there. You know that I also have a lot of actors that are tuning in here at all levels, but mostly a lot of background actors and a lot of people who are trying to get their footing in the industry. What advice can you give to those people, especially nowadays? The industry is changing so much, Tony. We all know this.
Yeah.
I mean, you and Joan and those that are working out there all the time are the lucky ones. But what kind of advice can you give to anybody who's, and maybe not just an actor, anybody in the industry or wants to get into the industry?
I mean, I think the big thing for actors to remember is that it is simply a numbers game. That if you keep at it long enough, the numbers are going to fall in your favor and you're going to get a break. And
Right.
then the question for you then becomes, am I making best use of this break? Am I ready for the break? Can I do a good job? Can I be memorable? And can I be such a presence that I'm going to get hired again? And the other thing to always remember, and this is very hard, especially because it's a numbers game, is remember that the people on the other side of the desk want nothing more than for you to be fantastic and for you to be what they're looking for. Because then this part of the job is done.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dead fucking fantastic for the role and you're the way they see it, then they're good. Then they can hire you and be done. And I was just having a conversation with an actor friend of mine. It has nothing to do with your ability if you don't get a role. It is simply that in this instance, for this role, you are not what the showrunners or the person who's hiring has in their mind for the role.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you're not going to be right for something else that comes later. It's just for this particular role, there was something that they saw in somebody else that was closer to what they had in their mind. So that's what I would say. And I say the same thing for writers. It's the law of averages. You just got to keep slugging away, and you've also got to say to yourself, do I have the constitution to do this? Because not everybody does. Not everybody can keep banging their head against that wall. It's really hard and can be very discouraging. But
Yeah,
in success, it's the best thing in the world.
totally agree with you. And Tony, first of all, thank you for your time. You've given some great time and some great advice, and I appreciate it because you're so busy. Can you just tell the audience one more time what all the shows are that you have? Being seen. I know you have the season finale, I believe, this coming.
Season finale of Fire Country is coming up. The writers' room for season 4 of Fire Country starts in 2 weeks. With Fire Country will be the premiere of Sheriff Country on CBS. So we will have Fridays at 8 and 9 Eastern. And then Majesty we'll make that next year. That's coming as well. But we're just thrilled to be able to keep making stuff and keep ideally delighting audiences and getting them to tune in.
We'll keep walking a walk and talking a talk and producing and writing and doing everything that you are. Send my best to Joan.
I will, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Tony, for coming on Rollin with Olan, and thank you to my audience for tuning in. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.